guys, Josh Cohen back here today talking about scopes of work. So when we left off last time, we finished up planning and we come up with a preliminary design for the house, preliminary floor plans, preliminary framing plans. Now we want to make sure that we clearly and carefully define the scopes of work in the project. This is where people get in trouble. When a contractor says, can you do that for $200,000? They don't have scopes of work. So let me show you how that works. In a typical construction project, you have 23 major events. Everything from framing, foundation, HVAC, plumbing, electric, drywall paint, and so forth. Out of those 23 events, you have to have really well-defined scopes of work for each event in order to have an actual cost estimate for that project that's going to be anywhere close to even relevant. Without an estimate up front of cost that even makes sense, your whole project's going to be in chaos. So let me give you an example. We're doing our HVAC scope of work today for this project right here, let's say. I want to know how much it's going to cost to do this HVAC event in that project. Here's a basement. This is a house that's been fully gutted. It's got a basement, a main floor, and a second floor. In this basement, it has a steel beam currently that's about 7 inches tall and about 4 inches wide. So we're looking at this 3-story house and we're saying, what do we need to do for an HVAC scope of work? There's many different ways you can go here. So let's say the owner or the investor requests that the house is a 2-zone system. We need to know if it's a true 2-zone system, is it 2 separate units, or is it just a damper controlled 2-zone? Let's say it's 2 units. So the first part of the scope of work would be that the house is going to have 2 independent HVAC units. We're going to say that one is a gas unit that goes in the basement, and that's going to supply the first floor and the basement, right? This is a very preliminary scope of work here. The second unit, we're going to say, is going to go in the attic. And it's unconditioned space, so we're going to put an electronic heat pump because it's unconditioned. So we're going to say in the attic, it's going to be a heat pump, which is electric. And that's only going to supply the second floor only. So we're going to have two different thermostats, one on the second floor for this heat pump, which is in the attic, and we're going to have a second unit that's gas, and let's say it's 90% efficiency. I'm going to say that this is the basement, and we're going to put it in the mechanical closet. Let's say in the floor plan, this is the mechanical room in the basement. We're going to put that 90% gas HVAC unit right there in the basement, and we're going to say that it vents out a sidewall right there. It's going to vent directly outside, direct vent system, 90% efficiency. Now we're going to say in our scope of work, where does the ductwork run? How does it look? What size is it? So part of this is we're going to require the contractor who does this work to not only pull the permit, but also provide us a duct layout and a low heat calc. So not only are they giving us a duct layout for how the ducts lay out throughout the whole house, they're also giving us a low heat calc to show us that the performance, meets code. Everything's compliant. We're not going to have hot and warm spots in the house. Part of doing HVAC like every other event is not only do you want to have really high performance, but you want it to be aesthetically pleasing too to the customer or end user of this property. You don't want to have, for example, ductwork that's going to hang below this middle steel beam in that basement because someone's going to hit their head in it. They're not going to like that. So part of the scope of work is requiring the contractor to put, in this case, probably a 14-inch supply trunk, which is 6 inches tall, down the center of this basement, right? We're going to require in our scope of work that the contractor has a really wide and short trunk that fits under that beam right down the center. Why down the center? Because the center of the house is where you get the best efficiency for HVAC work. The other part of our scope of work could say that we're going to have a return of the same dimension going right next to that supply. That way it keeps our headroom nice and high in that basement. So as you can see, scope of work, we're defining how the trunks look, where they're going, where the unit is, every little piece and detail of what the HVAC contractor is expected to do on this job. That way when the HVAC guy shows up, there's no questions about what he needs to do or get done. And when he bids the actual budget for the HVAC event, there's no discrepancies here. He knows exactly what he needs to do and what he's pricing. So we're going to get a real price. When the scope of work is really well defined, you're going to get a really good price attached to it that is an accurate bid. Let's say that the scope of work we define, we want like Braun fans in the bathrooms, and we want a fancy Bluetooth fan in the master bath. Let's say our scope of work ends up exceeding our budget. Our budget for this event and this project, let's say our actual budget was only $15K. And after doing this whole scope of work and fancy fans and all these other things we requested, let's say we ended up at $20,000 because we wanted him also to do, this HVAC guy, we wanted like an air purification system and some other features. What do we do now if we're over the budget? We now have to go back and either modify the scope of work, or if we're really, really far apart on this event, we may have to take a step back and take another look at that preliminary design, and maybe we end up making a design change. That's all for today about scopes of work. Hope you guys found this useful, but just remember for next time that without really accurate, detailed scopes of work, you will never get budgets that are realistic. And that's a huge mistake you see investors make all the time, and homeowners. Talk to you next time.